Okay, so I'm calling us to order. It's about, oh wow, we're early. 4:58, we're all here. So just to remind us all, we have a board meeting for an hour, and then at 6 o'clock, we've invited the public to join us at the, although they're always invited for this part too, but specifically for the data report. And so we'll try to be done with our normal board meeting by then. We could start with recognizing the one individual that's here with us.
Not yet.
You want to say your name?
Michelle Thompson.
And are you here for commenting on anything specific that you?
No.
Okay.
It's been 20 years, thought it was time to come back to school board meeting.
That's great. Look, it's the best thing I've heard the public say in years.
All right.
A better average than a lot of people.
So then I think we'll take the warrants separate from the minutes because there's a couple different minutes just not to confuse anything. We had minutes from October 19th and then also from November 3rd. Has everybody seen both of those?
Yes.
Off the top of my head, I don't remember what was on each of those meetings.
Well, the 3rd, wasn't that the special meeting?
So there's some adjustments we want to make on the special meeting.
I move we accept the minutes.
I'll second that.
Which one?
So,
Both. And then we can adjust them as needed.
Well, we have a motion on the floor, so do we have a second?
Yes.
Yep.
yes.
Okay, so the discussion would be that we, on the special meeting minutes, Frank had reviewed them and noticed that there were a couple things that weren't exactly right. And he was going to send us some comments on how to correct that. So I would recommend we not approve those minutes until we have Frank's comments. But I don't have them at the moment.
So we table those, or
Yeah.
just,
I guess.
will we table them until a earliest convenience?
All right, that's a good
Second.
one. Any discussion on that? And that was our meeting when we discussed the Vernon vote. All right, of November 3rd. So all in favor of tabling the minutes from November 3rd until we can have Frank help us review them?
Aye.
Any motions otherwise? And then we'll come back to the minutes of October
27th.
19th.
Oh, no.
October 19th. Any discussion on those? All in favor of their approval?
Aye.
Right, motion carried. So then we'll come back for the warrants. We have a motion on that, please.
I move we accept the warrants.
A second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And I think we are remiss in not welcoming to our table Kim Rock McNeil, who's down there. Kim is going to take over for Jane after how many years, Jane?
12.
So we should say that the cheese and crackers and apple cider is in your favor. All in your honor back there. Okay, so welcome, Kim. Thank you much, Jane. Glad you're here. You guys can work through one meeting together. All right. Coming on to administrative reports. Who's on the end? Deb.
So I think you all received a recent monthly report Brenda sent out to you. In addition to that, I am in the process of preparing our refunding application for Head Start and Early Head Start, which is due December 1st. Looking back at the information I reported last year, I'm seeing some improvement in the numbers in the sense that at this time last year we had 10 staff vacancies, primarily teacher vacancies. Right now we have 5, so unfortunately it's not 0, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. There is less of a vacancy rate for available slots in the community for infants and toddlers and preschoolers, so that's a good thing as well. And we are proposing basically a rollover with no major changes to our program model. If you remember back a year ago, we really went through some major restructuring. And we're holding to that for the entire year, and we promised everyone we would give it enough time to really see how it worked and to evaluate. And so far, it seems to be working well. The new Head Start performance standards are out, and there are lots of activities that are being provided in state, regional, and national forums to really talk about them. The rollout for implementing the new performance standards is over a year-long time frame, with the first deadline being November 9th, and that has to do with collecting information around absences, student absences. So the forum that we had on Monday certainly was connected to the new performance standards. And actually implementing in Head Start a system like you use in the elementary schools, where we have a deadline, and if children are not in school by 9 or 9:30, then calls are made to the parents, and we continue to make those calls if the child is out for any subsequent days. So there's a whole system that we're putting into place. And there were other pieces that I'll be giving to you incrementally. I may have mentioned to you that one of the big changes with performance standards has to do with the term membership of Policy Council members. So now Policy Council members can be on the board for 5 years. I know you're excited about that, Kim. The parents really are pretty happy about that, because they can be in our program for 5 years, from the time their child is an infant all the way through kindergarten. And so that, the National Head Start Association really paid attention to those commentaries from the parents when they were soliciting input. So that's a good thing. And it's great to have parents on the board for 5 years, because they really build momentum. So that we'll be looking at the bylaws in our next meeting and making that change. The other big step with performance standards is that they are giving us a broader stroke in the sense that we have more permission. It's not so prescriptive, so that the reports that you get monthly, as you know, were really based on what Head Start requires we give you for information. And now they are saying that we can make that report useful to us. So any data that you would like certainly is now something that we can give you, and we can do it in lieu of what we're giving you or in addition, and then we use that data obviously to drive the decisions around how we provide our programming. And so one of the big additions that I've already taken permission to add to that report will be things like looking at absenteeism, and I think that was the big one. Oh, the other one, thinking to the questions that you're asking of the administrators, things like the number of reports that we'd be maybe making to DCF and those kinds of things that would obviously have an impact on how we deliver our program.
Could you do homeless as well?
Homelessness, yep. So I'm actually looking to the board to tell me what you would like included in that report, because it's no longer prescribed directly by the feds.
So board members, what do we have that we would like to hear from Deb that we're not seeing on the monthly reports now? She's saying the DCFS numbers of reports and homeless, which would match what we have going on from the elementary schools, and absenteeism. Is there anything else that we would like to see?
Is it possible, Deb, to, without identifying people, to somehow report the number of engagements with other human service agencies that families are involved in, or medical, or?
That would be a full-time job for
That's
one
right, yeah,
person.
that's kind of
I think you can assume that every family is
So it's really not-
involved with others.
There's no advantage to that.
What would we do with that information? I think that
If there weren't much, then that would raise a question. There's plenty, so. it's
So
already-
what happens is that every family has a family support service worker, and individual goals are set annually with each family upon entrance into the program at the beginning of the program year. And the family support specialist works with that family throughout the year to actually achieve those goals or to make strides toward those goals. And it often involves making connections with other agencies. We may be able to tally that. I just would need to know what we do with the, what's the purpose of gathering that information.
I guess the purpose would be, although it probably wouldn't serve the purpose, would be make sure that people know all the opportunities and all the resources that are available to them, and that they're taking advantage of them. Kind of like what Mark talked about in terms of the coordinator of services to families.
CIS.
Yeah, let me just add to what Dave was saying, and it was a discussion that occurs periodically, having a coordinator of all of the social services. Because like you said, that would be a full-time job for you, simply to track it.
Right.
And it may be eventually a full-time job for somebody to track it for the entire school supervisory union, but I think it's something that would be needed. And it would not necessarily have to be a monthly report, but simply a list of those agencies that are currently being worked with. And if a new one pops up, put it on there. There's a myriad of agencies out there.
And there actually may be a way that we can extract that information from our database right now, because all of our data goes into our Job Plus software program, and so that may be possible. But one of the big things that we're wanting to see is the number of families involved with DCF. With the Department of Children and Families. Yeah, because that's an indicator of additional stress and trauma, and that informs our practice and our program delivery model. Okay, well, if there's anything else, shoot me an email.
Did you have something else, Mark?
No, that was it. I want to thank you for considering tracking it. Based on the road, I'm sure will be valuable information.
The other thing that occurs to me is we've talked a lot about the connection to our elementary schools. So if there's anything that happens specifically connecting, I'd like to hear about it in the monthly report. So it might not be something that happens on a regular basis, but I know you and Andy had talked about some joint teacher training.
And that's we're doing some visitations now.
So anything like that that directly ties into the elementary schools, including not just Brattleboro, but since we're in a larger area for the Head Start and Early Head Start program.
Okay, that certainly is useful information to track.
And then I had a question. The last report that I have is September. And so it must not be what you're talking about.
When did Brenda send, when did you receive that? She told me she sent
11/10.
Okay, so that's the most recent, and they must be working on the end of October, so you should be seeing that one soon.
So because at that point you still had education vacant positions under education, early Head Start, you had 9.
Yeah, we're
So
down
you
to
hired,
5.
and you had 1 in family services under Head Start.
Right, and that one is still vacant because we are under-enrolled within our home visiting program. So once we have those slots at least halfway, there are 10 vacancies right now, then we'll hire another person. And that challenge is actually one that other human services, child care, family support programs are experiencing in this community. We're having a real hard time with vacancies in home visiting programs, and we're not entirely sure why. We have some suspicions. One is that families just are so busy, they're not available. The other is that with the high rate of addiction and drug abuse, families may not want us to be visiting them at home.
And so I was looking at the enrollment as well for the funded and the enrolled and the vacancy. And I know we normally have a waiting list, but right now there's 3 vacancies in early Head Start and 5 at the center besides the 10 in the home base.
Yes.
And is that a rotating thing and you think it'll change, or do
It
you?
has changed since that deadline, or that date. We still have the 10 vacancies in home base. We have, we don't have that many openings in Westminster now. Those, I mean, I think we still have a couple of openings, but not as many as that. And Canal Street usually, or Head Start usually, those slots are filled fairly quickly. So, but we do not have a wait list. And that's, you know, in seeking that information from Wyndham Childcare for my grant writing project, that seems to be a trend in the community. You know, the one area that we could probably still provide services is more infant toddler. We really have addressed that with the changes we've made this year. But in the community, not specifically for those Head Start eligible or early Head Start eligible families, there's still a need, but the problem is we cannot find qualified staff.
Because we had you know, a lot of public concern about taking away a Head Start classroom, right? Mm-hmm. But we're not seeing a problem from these numbers. We took away a classroom and we're still not full.
Right.
And I'm just looking at it from our discussion too that we talked about with the kindergarten or the Head Start preschool program in our schools. And if we're not pushing for those numbers, then it seems to me this model that you've mentioned before of combining and not having it just being Head Start may be more easily done.
We'll talk about that.
When I'm talking about tonight?
Yeah, it's on the agenda.
Perfect. Talk about that more.
It's under new business preschool updates.
You have more updating, that's great. All right, that's all of my questions. You guys have more? I just had quite a few. We haven't seen Deb for a little bit, so I wanted to get one. That sends us over to you, Andy.
Okay, very brief tonight. Just 6 kids in, 1 out. You see it listed there, 6 new kids, 6 new arrivals, 1 left. Tonight we are having our dining for a cause, both at Vermonto's and the 99 restaurant, where families who go there with a coupon to dine, 15% of the proceeds will go back to Academy School, the fundraiser that we started doing here with the local restaurants. And the last thing I want to say is we've been doing community breakfasts again. We'll do them in the fall and spring. And today was the last day for the fall where we, 3 different breakfasts. The first was kindergarten, 1st grade. Last week was grades 2 and 3, and today was grades 4, 5, and 6. And we served a total of 646 breakfasts on those 3 days. So a huge turnout. A lot of great things came out of the kitchen that day. A lot of people came. So very successful. Thank you.
Andy, are those all free? Do we pay for parents to eat?
They're all free, yes.
Even the adults?
Even the adults. Yeah. Free for all.
But only on those days.
Yeah, it's always free for kids. All meals now are always free for kids in Brattleboro town. And there's an adult charge normally for breakfast or lunch, but on these occasions, because they're special family breakfast, then families come in and eat free.
Will that be happening at Oak Grove and Green Street? Is there a chance for those types of breakfasts to happen there?
We had one last year, and we plan on having at least 1, possibly 2 this year.
Yeah, we've talked it down a bit about doing something like that at Green. It'd have to be a little different because we don't have the kitchen.
Right.
Yeah.
But we have talked about different scenarios.
Mark?
Okay. So statistics here, just want to focus busy month. We had 17 DCF reports. I added the column of number of students in foster care. We have 7 students, and 3 went into foster care this month.
Does that mean 3 left the school or 3?
No, they're still in the school. They're just now in foster care. On a positive note, our spelling team continues to be very successful. I think the last meeting I announced that the team won the district competition. Since then, we've won our regional competition as well. And this Saturday, we'll be competing in the state championship competition in Northfield, Vermont.
That's a hike.
Yeah, so we're excited for students, Griffin Rankins, Evie Keel, Autumn Newsman, Evan Wagner, Thomas Hyde, David Berkson Harvey, and Sylvie Land. They're putting a lot of time and effort into this club and really taking it seriously. So it's great to see their success.
Who's your advisor?
And Alice Sharks is the coach. Just a few other things I want to note. Our Student Senate is officially up and running. As we have for the past number of years, our first initiative is working with the Project Feed the Thousands food campaign in the community. So they're taking the lead with that. Our winter sports registrations are out, so we're beginning to put the winter sports program together. It'll be a 4-week program once again this year. This past week we've had parent-teacher conferences, and those are ongoing. We have a goal of reaching 100% of our parents. We've had great participation so far, but we're still reaching out to those families we haven't connected with. Parent surveys, we've collected 80 plus at this point, which is a really good collection rate. And lastly, professional development next Monday and Tuesday. Staff will be working on the Reading Street Development PD with Brian Bittner, and we'll be also splitting some of that time doing some math work around Eureka and developing a math lesson protocol.
Thank you, Mark. Going it down to Jerry.
As Andy pointed out, and even in Mark's report, we've had a lot of new students enrolling, new families coming into the area. I have 2 listed here just for October, but next month in my November report, you'll see that I'll be adding 4 more students. One family of 3 that are coming from a homeschool situation, and another student coming in from New York State. So a lot of families were moving in, and so the 3 of us were emailing back and forth, like, what are our numbers, what are our numbers? You know, quite interesting how many people are coming in now. And then I did have one family that you'll see did move down to Leeds, Massachusetts. They had come up last year from the Northampton area, so they went back down there again. In addition, tomorrow night is our big Harvest Fest and Curriculum Night. Our Curriculum Night focus is on our social curriculum, looking at our guiding principles, so that will be a lot of fun. Our Harvest Dinner is a collaborative effort with our Farm to School Committee, Food Connects, as well as the co-op come in and help to prepare some of, and Cafe Services, excuse me. Cafe Services provide soup and salad for our big dinner, and then students are involved with helping to make a food item from either our garden or from the Food Connect garden up at, it's not Familari, I can't call it that anymore, but up to their Food Connects farm. And so they've been cooking today, and they'll cook again tomorrow, and then it will be a big potluck. So we get a great turnout, so I would welcome any or all of you to come on by. We start at 5:30 is curriculum night portion of it, and then we'll be breaking into the feast at about 6:15. We also had, just highlight one more thing, that about 14 student leaders, 5th and 6th graders, joined Green Street student leaders, and that was what, a couple weeks ago, I think, Mark?
Yes.
And the student leaders with Catherine Mason and Tracy B'nai Perrin worked at the Cusick Room, and they did stuff around social justice and restorative justice, what it's like to be a student leader in our buildings. So it's a lot of work between, I think the two of them had 25, 26 students at the Cusick room. So then they were there all day, so they had a great time.
And Officer Kerrigan came and spent a good portion of the day with the students as well.
That's
and that
right.
was a very interesting portion of the day. The kids really responded well to Officer Kerrigan.
Yeah. Speaking of, thank you, because speaking of the Brattleboro Police Department, I'll just put a big shout out to them that they've been coming in once a month. One officer's been coming in once a month to read to our classrooms. And so they've read in first grade and in second grade. And we just had a meeting with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and they're starting a pilot program, and it's going to, it's called Bigs in Blues. Yeah, and they're going to work with Oak Grove students, so probably about 4 officers will be considered bigs, and they'll be kind of matching, we'll be doing some matching. So in the next month or so, we'll be trying to work on that program so that we'll have some big officers and that will be connected with some of our elementary kids. So I'm looking forward to that program.
Just related to that, just so I jump in, the police department is sponsoring a basketball game Friday night with the students at VIIS, and you know, all with the understanding of getting more interaction with the police department and the students. It's really great. I was drafted to play, but
Are you playing? All right, put that on our
they
calendar.
have some big officers, and my job is elbow underneath.
What day is this one?
Friday night.
Friday night. Friday night entertainment in Brattleboro involves the superintendent playing the police and the kids.
Students versus the basketball. Might have a dance-off afterwards.
Oh, wow. We're putting on our calendars there. All right, so I think that kicks us back to Lyle. And I think we should officially announce or welcome Lyle in her capacity. Since we had our last meeting, Lyle has been officially hired, I guess, appointed, and now will be our new superintendent to replace Ron in July.
21st, 2017.
So congratulations, Lyle. Welcome. Some cheese and crackers in honor of you. The cheese and crackers. Thank you, Donovan. Oh well. So, either of you have comments?
I've got information as the agenda progresses, so I don't have an administrative report at this point.
And we have a pretty long
presentation. Okay. Policy Council, I think we just heard from Deb. We're set. Energy Committee has probably not met.
Nope.
And Finance, have you met lately?
Meeting even as we speak.
And you're not there?
And I'm not
You're in 2
there.
places at once?
I can't be in 2 places at once.
Anything we need to know?
Yes. He's not sure.
I defer to the guy who says yes.
We're hoping to schedule a SU board meeting November 30th. And, let me just check this.
SU meeting?
Yes. Yeah, so November 30th, and it looks like the Finance Committee would meet at 5,
Okay.
and then the SU board would meet at 6.
Where?
And we haven't determined the location yet.
And this is for?
Supervisor union business.
Because we haven't met enough that week.
Finance and services.
6 to 7.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll be an opportunity for this Finance Committee to show some draft budget work as well. So.
Yes.
Oh, right there. And just as I had down for tomorrow that we had an Act 46 study committee meeting,
No.
but I think it was
that's not
canceled maybe?
Right. So that was going to be at, I think it was an information meeting, but that
Yeah.
is not happening. So the next study committee meeting, actual meeting is December 1st.
So we're gonna do the supervisory union board on the 30th and Act 46 on the 1st.
Yes, you are. I do have a schedule.
Would other people other than me be interested in getting drafts, electronic drafts of the Finance Committee's work as it progresses? So we can kind of keep track of, we didn't get that till late last year, and it was a pretty steep
You mean
increase.
work on the budget in general?
Yeah, on the SU budget, that's what they work on, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Could we get drafts of that email once they're developed?
Yeah, I think the Finance Committee reps could just
Yes,
forward-
what we're doing is each representative of the Finance Committee is sending that information to the chair of their respective boards. Joe, you received mine from last
Yeah.
night.
So
That's a great point.
actually, Dave, that's a good point though, because what we decided at the last SU meeting was that we wanted Mark as the finance representative from the Brattleboro School Board. That was a request from one of the other towns to have the information sent on the SU warrants
Yes.
each time that they get them, because they get them ahead of time. So we're forwarding that now to all the board members.
That's why we got them.
And,
Ah.
but then yours, David, is an additional request, but certainly easy enough as well. Mark,
Yeah.
basically just share the budget information as well as the warrants. Mark sends it to me and I'll just shoot it off to the
That was
rest
the first time, yeah. Frank has been very conscientious in sending it out to the Finance Committee members for many months since he's been there. And the ponderous reading,
Yeah.
if you, so, but I'd be more delighted to share that reading with other people if they see it there.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
We appreciate that ponderous reading report. Is there a diversity report? Anything on that?
Yeah.
No. So then, any other committee reports anyone can think of? Moving on to an Act 46 update. I don't know, Ron, if I have anything. We've had some community forums that are also officially Act 46 meetings. So Kim, Mark, and I were all three at the Putney one. The Putney tone was actually a very engaged audience. I found it to be a really inquisitive and respectful and good far-reaching thoughts, really.
Was there a turnout?
It was a pretty good turnout too in Putney. I don't know, 30 maybe?
Yeah.
25 or 30?
Okay.
And then I think the only other one's been Dummerston.
This last night. Yes.
Dummerston last night, which was long.
Actually, the best turnout.
Yeah, it was a very strong turnout. There was probably 50, 40, 40?
I think it was 30.
Oh, it's a smaller room, that's true.
Yeah.
All right. But a lot of questions, a lot of concerns by the folks of Putney.
Dummerston.
Putney was fine, sorry. Putney had some concerns, but not a lot. Dummerston had a lot of concerns. Some of the concerns were things that we'll take back to the study committee, and that one of those is the continuation of the discussion on proportional or hybrid representation, how the unified board would come about. We haven't really discussed that here amongst this board, although I guess I should say that we all made a decision, Mark, Kim and I, and then Ricky and Ian also were there the first time we made it, that Brattleboro remains neutral on that. The differences are either Brattleboro gets 6 on the board because we are the larger proportion of population, or it would be 3 from Brattleboro and then another 3 elected at large, and then in each scenario there would be 1 coming from each of the towns. The difference is that the votes are commingled and it's not possible for the outlying towns, or for Brattleboro for that matter, to know exactly who voted for which candidate, because everyone votes on everyone after the first year if it's a proportional representation or hybrid representation. In the proportional representation, it would be a non-commingled vote, so people could see directly who, say, Dummerston voted for the Dummerston representation. I don't know, Todd and David, if you had any comments on that, but the feeling for the rest of us was that it's It's an issue that really, either way, Brattleboro is well represented, we thought, and it's a big concern for the smaller towns because they are concerned of Brattleboro holding a large percentage of the votes. Did you have any thoughts on that you want us to take back?
I think the probably obvious ones, the representation is difficult for Brattleboro to have more votes than all the other towns combined would be pretty intimidating. And being the Brattleboro rep on the Waste Management Board, I have 6 votes, and all the other towns have 1. There are 14 other towns, though, so it's somewhat moderated. But generally, when there's a decision to be made, the Brattleboro votes make the difference. So it's a meaningful consideration. But compared to the democratic question around the commingled ballots, where a town, Vernon or Guilford or whatever, or whoever could vote for a particular person that they wanted as their representative, and another person from that town could be voted in by all the other towns that they didn't want. So that's a conundrum. But I'm sure you've...
That is the conundrum,
yes.
exactly
Yeah.
there. And so, unless you guys had really strong opinions, the 3 of us felt like it was not really our place in Brattleboro to make that decision for the smaller towns. So we've become Switzerland, and we remain neutral. So that is one thing that came up last night that's coming back again. I'm trying to think, there was one other. Oh,
Does that
the
mean
town.
there's Swiss chocolate in the stew now?
We haven't talked about
The
stew for a while.
most delicious ingredient.
Then the other part that comes up for discussions, again, is the school closure, but really the process of that, the wording and what's included in our actual report, but in the Articles of Agreement that we're sending up. And so we're going to look at that again, just to make sure it addresses, there were some concerns in Putney particularly, that at one point we had in something about taking the feed from the town in a survey, or at least having discussions and making sure that the town's geographic location and the effect of a closure on a town would be definitely considered, and it's not exactly worded in there right now, so probably look at that again. Other concerns from Dummerston are not so addressable. They're just the concern of losing the town meeting portion. There's some concerns by some folks over whether they can continue to claim their property values and feeling like that's a draw for their town, and if they're concerned of what that might mean for their town if it changes in a merger. What else? Thinking, anybody else?
No, that's pretty.
I think it was important for the study committee, and I think they did it effectively, to talk about equity for student opportunities, program opportunities, that don't exist in Dummerston and some of the smaller districts, and also the cost savings. So I thought that made a lot of sense in terms of the overview that was provided. And just, it's not related to Dummerston, it's related to every district. The fact that in December, the week of December 5th, each of the towns need to have a public information meeting about the Vernon withdrawal. And so the schedule has been established: December 5th for Guilford, December 6th for Dummerston. Putney is going to be on Wednesday the 7th because there's a conflict with Brattleboro Town Schools, and then on the 8th, Thursday, Brattleboro Town. So I'll give you this as a copy of them.
We can pass this down, whoever wants to put those in, but the Act 46 folks need to be here on Thursday, December 8th. It'd be a good time, and David, if you can. And we're, the information you all have seen, what we sent out. This time it's been sent out by email to all the town reps. It's been sent out to the select board. Hopefully you saw it, David?
Not yet.
Yes?
Not yet, no.
I'm gonna have to check with Annette on that one. I thought it was clear, but it might not have been enough. And then it's gone out to the Facebook from websites, right, and the flyer to the schools. All of you got that by email, so The idea of letting folks know it is December and complicated time, but that would, Vernon, there's someone from Vernon is coming to the meeting, and then any other updates from Act 46 in general could happen on that day and night. Okay, so anything?
Is anybody, if there's going to be a press release or attempt to engage the Reformer and the Commons to get articles, not just a...
On the Vernon vote specifically?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much if you call them up and say, I'd like to come in and talk about something, they will
It
talk
seems
about
like
this.
Vernon should be.
Yeah, I thought Beth and somebody else was going to work on the draft.
About Vernon?
Yeah.
I wrote something, didn't I?
It's just hard to get people to turn out, and that's one way to get it to a lot of people.
Yes. There is a, I know I've talked to Chris Mays at the Reformer about Act 46 in general, and I've had some folks ask me and said that they would like the Reformer to do a write-up on, basically what is the law, and then what the study committee has come up with, and then some of the dissenting concerns that other folks have had, and try to kind of compare and do some analysis of that, and they're looking at it. So I think I have to go back to that Vernon thing. I think I sent it out. I don't think we finished, because I think I did write those 4 bullet points at that meeting, and I think I sent it on to Richard and you, but I haven't seen anybody come back to that. So. Okay, then anything else on Act 46, or we're moving on? Any other unfinished business that anyone can think of?
We have a meeting scheduled for the Brattleboro Town School Board in December. Is it the 1st and 3rd?
The 7th.
No,
At Green Street.
it's not.
Unless I got last
That's
year's
what I-
calendar.
yeah.
Is that-
That's what I got.
We have a meeting scheduled on the 7th?
Yeah, well, on the, unless I got, this is the 9/20/16.
I didn't.
Work plan and use that.
I didn't, but I don't have anything in December, so.
That's what I have down.
Green Street budget.
Yeah,
capital plan
no,
development.
I guess we're going to have to revise that because...
It's a good point there, David.
Oh,
The
right.
8th, we moved because of the conflict on the 7th, so that would still be a
Academy school
conflict.
has a function.
Yeah, the 8th is Academy on Act 46.
So
We have to-
what might be good is if on the 8th, before the information meeting at 6 o'clock, if we met a half hour ahead of time.
Is just handing out the budget, basically, in capital development?
What's on our work plan?
It says
Just
budget, capital plan development and review.
Half an hour, isn't it?
I mean,
5:15? Will that work for everybody instead of on a Wednesday, on Thursday before what we've already planned?
I can't. The Waste Management District Board, we said, I just checked.
What
But
time?
we often, it's, the Finance Committee is at 6 and the board's at 7. Sometimes it's at 5:30.
I actually have a conflict that same day.
But we have had budget meetings in the mornings, although I guess it's...
Neither one of these two can make that. What about the following week on the 14th is, oh, I have a band concert for my daughter. It'd be nice to be able to do that.
Band concert.
What was it?
Budget comment.
How about the SU, yeah. SU meeting on Thursday, the 11th or 15th, is that happening?
Yep, it is.
Meet before that.
It's on the 15th.
I'm going to be in Putney.
We have an SU for the 30th.
That's November, I think we're in December now.
Would that be all right, acceptable for that company? If we possibly met on Thursday, the 15th, before the Putney SU meeting in Putney?
Yep.
Yes?
So that'll be,
It would be at 5, say
December
5:15?
Well, if you did 5:30, the SU meeting's at 6:30.
Or is it 6?
No,
So 5:30?
5:30?
Anybody objecting to that?
I'm not objecting, and I'm not asking you to not meet them, I'm just informing you that I can't be there that night.
But I think it's okay, it's the
Would
budget and you will have been
the administrators have
represented,
to be there for?
No, I think for this part of the budget capital plan, principals have already had input on that, so I would actually say the principals would need to be there.
So this is a budget meeting or the school board meeting?
School board meeting to review the budget.
Okay.
Thursday, the 15th of December at 5:30. It'll end by 6:30 for sure, because at that point the SU meeting starts. So the Brattleboro Town School Board will be visiting Putney for our
I gotta get this all down right now.
meeting. Now, Kim, that is not what was on your normal schedule, so if you can't make that, just let us know and somebody else has to
I
pay.
can, around 15
And then we'll meet the week after?
Not you.
Not
No, then
until
we wouldn't meet
January
again in
4th.
December, right?
No, not till January 4th.
Oh.
Putney School. And then the next meeting is January 4th, is that what you had as well? And where is that one?
That's at Green Street, it says here.
Any other old business, unfinished business?
Don, could we get those electronically ahead of time too, so we, the draft, the capital plan? Yeah, that's great.
So we can cancel the 7th, right?
Are we planning other meetings in the morning for the budget, or are we gonna be able to do it just in our normal meetings if we do December and January?
No? I think we just do it.
We did cancel the 7th. The only meeting is on the 15th. I worked on the 5th, so I really.
All right, so then we go on to the moment you were waiting for, your preschool update.
Sure. So myself, Lionel, Andy, Deb, and Frank met just to talk about the concept of a blended classroom, Head Start and non-Head Start students at a particular school. So with Andy, it was at Academy School. And as we discussed this, we realized that in terms of space, there would need to be some facility improvements before this would happen. So we're starting to look at that. But right after that meeting, I did contact Jerry, and we talked about Oak Grove. And so it's probably likely that Oak Grove would be able to host a classroom possibly for next year. And the concept is that you'd have 8 or 7 Head Start students along with 8 or 7 non-Head Start, and would be looking at a teacher that would be funded through kind of a mixed funding. We would receive a good share of the funding through the pre-K money that we get from the state based on the numbers of students that would be participating. So the rest of that salary, we'd have to plan on in terms of the budget. I believe a para would be funded through EES, so the support staff would be through EES. And then we talked about potentially a third person, either a half-time or a full-time, through the STEP programming, through special ed, and that would be funded through the district, the supervisory union special ed.
Is that the required number of teachers?
No, it's probably 2 to 2.5, but I think in terms of some of the challenges that have happened in Head Start, I think it makes sense to have it well-staffed. And I think in terms of the STEP programming that's happening, I think if we can fund it through special ed, it makes a lot of sense to do that. It's just kind of a bonus in a sense. And it's not coming directly from Brattleboro Town, which makes sense.
It would be, I mean, that pre-K money went right into our general fund and reduced our taxes.
Right.
So if it went into the general fund and then was used for this position, that would certainly affect that money would now be going out on a specific additional staff person rather than the way it is right now.
Well, no, now it goes out to a program.
Right.
Now it would come into the school.
Oh, I see.
Okay, see, so it's not a negative.
So it wouldn't go out to the private preschools that are around. So they would lose that funding and it would come.
For those 7 students. We have 120 plus students. So, it wouldn't be an impact on that.
Great.
So it would mean that those 7 students wouldn't be in those programs.
Right.
It
So
could
that-
also mean that there's 7 new students.
Absolutely. And that's a good possibility. So anyway, the funding is actually going to help us, not only to provide the programming, but also the reduce taxes as it
And
has been.
is the
But the rest of
idea,
the funding would continue to go out to the private preschools that are using it. So we wouldn't be damaging that,
No.
that part, okay, great.
and the idea would not be necessarily just Brattleboro?
Well, I think
Students.
initially, we want to look at, let's say, Oak Grove in this case. We'd like to have that happen at Academy, whether it's, we're able to do it next year or the following year. We'd like to think about Green Street at some point, but Guilford, I know, is open to the concept. They have space, they have a classroom. So I would say, you know, Guilford would be another potential.
But I guess I was meaning, would the Oak Grove preschool students be from Brattleboro only?
Yes.
Because EES students are coming in from the whole county.
But it would be kind of like the students that are Canal Street right now,
Right.
primarily Brattleboro.
Right, the ones that are 4, so we wanted, because we serve 3 and 4-year-olds.
Right, so we're looking at
So we're wanting to
4-year-olds.
put the students who would be going into kindergarten the following year, probably in the Oak Grove neighborhood, in that setting.
So there's things to be worked out. We still have to look at facilities. There's a classroom, but there's, you know, equipment, furniture, things like that that needs to be appropriate, and
And a full-day
playground,
program?
playground facility, that sort of thing we have to look at. There's potential for federal grant money to support this. We'll look at that. It would be a full-day program, like the school day program. So as we do more planning, we'll keep bringing this back to you. As it impacts the budget, we'll identify that. I think in terms of the overall impact of the budget, I think it would be very slight, if any, because of the turnover that we've had in the district over the last 3 years. And I would see the same thing happening this year. So it's exciting. So I'd love to be able to, as we plan the budget, be able to say we will have 1 classroom in the Brattleboro Town Schools in the pre-K.
So let's specifically ask the board if we're in support of this theory and asking our administrators to move forward with that?
Yeah, and with an eye to, I mean, the idea is to increase the availability of high-quality childcare, so we can, with an eye toward expanding it.
So I have a question. How are you getting these kids to school? Are we paying for another bus? Because you certainly can't put those children on a bus with the older kids.
Those are the details we have to work out. We have ways to do it.
Okay.
Does the EES have a bus right
No, the parents transport right
Yeah.
now to Canal Street.
No, that shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, so the next thing on our agenda is class size.
So we have class size in our presentation.
Perfect. Quarterly budget update.
Frank was going to do that, and I know he's at NSU Finance Committee meeting, and he plans to be here shortly, but it might be that he needs to do that at the end of the data
Okay.
session.
1% applications were emailed to all of us. We should have had a chance to review them. Any question? Well, let's have a motion and then we can discuss them.
Move to approve the round 2, 1% applications.
Second.
Any discussions at this point?
Just a clarification, there were, I think, 5 or 6 at the top that were identified as WSESU on the forms we got. Could you just explain what that is? Or was that a summary? I wasn't sure what I was looking at.
Well, it may be that it affects all of the school districts, but in your cases, it still would be teachers from the Brattleboro Town districts.
There's a bunch of them, special ed. So I thought that was just.
Okay, so it is special ed. Yeah,
Those are special ed.
so it is special ed.
Okay, so that's how we put a portion of our 1%. Okay, good, thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the 1% as shown?
Aye.
Any dissension? Motion carries.
These are the originals that need to be signed.
And so then we're actually on to the next agenda items. Anyone have any thoughts? I think we want to hear about preschool again. Any updates on that?
Sure.
Anybody else with any thoughts for the next meeting?
Make sure we know about any Christmas parties that are coming up. It's going to be December 15th.
Actually, the preschool update might be a little bit hard where you're not coming. You would know something, you want to tell us, right?
Yeah.
I guess I have a question too, if there's anything for the budget. A lot of times you administrators have given us a list of things to look for that used to come on colored paper with Jim sometimes, but things that you're looking to put in or take out that draws attention to it, if we can have something.
The building requests.
Yeah. That was helpful to see.
Can you explain?
Perplexed.
You hand in a
Yeah.
budget request in the beginning?
Yeah, we're working with Frank on that, but I'm not sure what you're asking for.
That.
Oh, that all goes into.
Right,
But it
so,
sounds like you want something different than what we're turning into Frank that he.
well, so I don't think we got it last year as much as we had gotten it in other years, and it was Frank's first year of doing it. So when reading the budget, it was hard to find, a lot of things moved in the budget, so it was hard to find what went up and what went down. And in other years, we've known, well, we were looking for an increase in the music program because we need more instruments, or we're going to put a new walkway covering on something, whatever. If we had some way of finding stuff in the budget.
Does that mean the capital?
It wasn't necessarily capital though, it's anything that was going on.
So the way it's being done presently for the budget you're about to see a draft of in the near future, that first of all, there's much fewer line items, so it's going to be easy to see where the money's going. So there's a dramatic reduction in line items, and then in the notes for a particular line item, if there's a shift up or down of any significance, then there's notes right there that you can see. So right now, there's no plan for us to do those worksheets that you're speaking of.
So it should be embedded in the lines.
Correct.
In the notes.
In the notes. All right, so we look at the notes then, guys, that's what we need to see.
Didn't we always have that information, like we had the 2 years prior?
Yeah.
We were able to look at every single category and see
Right.
Yeah, you'll see.
what it's been over the last couple of years.
You get 20, let's say FY16,
Yeah.
then the actual, then FY17, which is this year, and then FY18, which is what we're proposing. That's there.
Frank goes through pretty specifically where those differences are significant
Right.
and covers them.
And after FY18, in the next column, it's column H, there's a percentage.
Yeah.
It'll tell you up or down, 5%, 10%, 20%. And if we're up anything more than a nominal percentage, we're putting in notes.
You get responses from board members.
All right, so I don't think we have anything else at the moment, no other agendas. And we are 2 minutes before 6 o'clock. What happened?
We can use for a setup and a little break.
Welcome, we're going to get started. Before we get started, I've been asked to make sure everyone signs in. So if you have not signed in, I'm just going to leave it up here in front of Judy and grab it, sign it. So we are asked annually to do an overview of assessment for Brattleboro Town. I think we've responded to the requests as well as we can. So we'll go through first. We're all teachers and we can't get away from teaching, so we're trying to teach you tonight. That assessment is originally Latin, and informal and formal ways to check student understanding and student progress. So you've all had your Latin lesson for this evening. So why do we assess? We're trying always to ensure that students are making progress, that we help students understand the concepts before moving on to new material. We hope the teachers, through assessing, have the information they need so that we can respond promptly and effectively to student needs. And at least at the curriculum office level, we look at trends over time to ensure that we're making good decisions around curriculum. So the different types of assessment. Classroom assessment, there are two, summative and formative. We're going to talk about those in more depth in just a few minutes. Screenings, you've probably heard these names. Ames Webb, predictive assessment of reading is new this year. I'm not sure if Brian's going to talk about it, but Brian assessed every single kindergarten student in WSESU with this new screening. But a screening is sort of a snapshot. This is what the students are like at this time on this day. And it just gives us sort of a baseline to see where students are. And if there are students that we are rising right now to sort of the top of our, we need to be careful, we need to be on top of looking at specific students. Diagnostic assessments are assessments that we would use to dig a little deeper if we do have students that have risen on our sort of radar of students that need some more assessment, deeper assessment. And then SBAC is what you hear about in the news probably. Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, is that right? Okay. Literacy and math, and that's a summative assessment that's given yearly to check student progress.
And how many?
Yep.
How many states are on this SBAC one?
Do you know how many are doing SBAC?
40 some odd in buying into the Common Core, and about half of them are part of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, and the other half are part of the PARC. Our near neighbors to the south and west are PARC. New Hampshire is an SBAC state.
So we said we'd talk a little bit more. Formative assessment are done by classroom teachers. You may have also heard of it as exit tickets. Here are a couple of 5th grade examples. A teacher had done a math lesson and at the end of the lesson asked some questions. And here are some samples of work that the students turned in. And then you can see right under the work, the teacher has made very specific comments on this, I still question this, or it looks like you did this, but I'd like to know how you did this in addition. So those are both 5th grade examples. Here's a 2nd grade, a 1st grade on the right, a 2nd grade on the left, again math. The one on the left looking at hundreds blocks and 10 blocks, and the one on the right is Bob went fishing, caught 5 fish, John caught some more fish. They had 7 fish in all, and you can see the student drew a little picture and then did a math equation. So that was how the teacher could check to see where the student's understanding was.
And for those students in the audience, or for those parents that have young students in the audience, that picture on the right is called a number bond. Real important model in the new math curriculum that we're using. Sorry.
That's okay, that's good. So the vast majority of student assessment done in WSESU is formative assessment. It's just what we showed, little quick check-ins that happen every single day in every single classroom in Wyndham Southeast. Now we'll start getting into sort of the data portion. Every year we try to report numbers of students living in poverty. You can see the numbers up there. And of course Vermont is the statewide percentage, and you can see that we are well above the state in free and reduced lunch, again, as always. Class size, that was on our agenda for tonight. I was asked to pull, of course, class sizes have changed since putting this together last week, but that's the way it is. And you can see that it varies greatly by grade level. When we're placing students, we try to place them as close to their home school as possible, but you can also see right now that if a second grader moved in, that second grader, depending on where they lived, may have to go to Green or to Oak because we're getting much higher numbers at Academy.
And maybe just a question that sticks out, 4th grade being so low at Green Street as opposed to the other two?
So we're going to talk a little bit later about cohort effect, and you're going to see that 4th grade is a challenging group, and knowing the needs of the students in those particular grades, we will work to keep those numbers low throughout their time. And then outline town. Obviously, you've figured out that the number to the right is the total enrollment. And again, you can see it ranges wildly. If you look at 3rd grade, there's a 27, and then there's a class of 13. And of course, Putney is our only pre-K. And Dummerston and Putney, 7th and 8th, are on the far right there.
So does Vernon have 2 teachers in 5th and 6th for 24, 23?
Two teachers in kindergarten, so they're split, a class of 13, a class of 12. 2 teachers in 3rd grade, a class of 15 and a class of 16, and 4th grade, a class of 14 and 13. You're reported each month by principals on the homeless families, but all together. This was, again, as of last week. There was another call today, but we have 17 students in Brattleboro town. 8 of those students are on IEPs, and the WSESU homeless number is 38 at this point.
That includes the high school?
Yes. It does not. Would you go, Deb, would you go through Kira Sawyer Hardigan for homeless as well?
We get pre-K kids.
Okay, so
We
it does
definitely
include
get
pre-K kids. But yes, pre-K through 12. It's a little harder for us to always identify the high school kids because sometimes they're living with a friend, staying on somebody else's couch. They don't report as homeless.
And sometimes families don't report as homeless. You know, sometimes it's hard to necessarily to find out. We rely on the administrative assistants and the counselors to gather that information, make referrals to Kira as the homeless liaison. But sometimes it's hard to do that. Okay. Shall we? Okay. So I'm going to stand up here because I don't want to turn my neck too much. So there can be lots of reasons why one would literally sit beside a student in order to assess something. You might want to find out, as Lyle has pointed out, what's the short-term effect of your instruction so that you can, if there's a problem, you can fix that on the go, either in the class or for the next class. That's formative assessment. You might want to sit beside a student in order to determine whether you can, you want to make a summary statement about how much they've learned, whether they've learned all of the standards that you want to teach. That's often going to be what's called a summative assessment. You might also want to sit beside a student in order to get a quick thumbs up, thumbs down kind of dipstick for, wow, I need to pay more attention here. I'm quickly getting a sense of, do I need to be pursuing more information about the student, or do I get a quick sense that, yeah, they're okay, I can sort of let them proceed with the regular instruction, but these others I might want to pay attention to.
Can I do an example of that?
Sure.
Thumbs up if you have your snow tires on. Okay, so all of you without your thumbs up right now,
quick screen.
We might need to do some coaching on when did it snow last year?
Right. Vermont winters. So this is a quick snapshot that we take 3 times a year. And it's a little artificial. I mean, we're sort of reporting these data. And by the way, it's a little hard to see. So there's Academy Oak and Green, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And you notice that the bars, the paired bars, green and orange, add up to 100. So what this is showing is at that point in time when we did the first benchmark assessment, these data have all completely changed. At that point in time, we had kids for say Green Street, nearly 55% in the green, 45%, 55% meeting a kind of a nationally normed target that says, in general, our predictions are that these kids are gonna be okay going forward, versus about 45% who show up low, scoring low enough that we want to look into the status of those students. That's all it tells us. Do we have reason to believe that they'll be able to access regular instruction without a whole lot of issues, or do we want to look into them a little bit more?
So Paul, at the beginning of the year, the fourth grade had more red than for all of
Yes. Yes, in this particular instance for math, fourth grade, what we find is that over time, in particular grades, there seems to be a lot of growth. Fourth grade historically has sort of been a time when a whole bunch of stuff comes together. It's applied to fractions. Kids start to understand fractions and start to take off. So we'll actually anticipate potentially more growth in fourth grade math than we would in some other areas, okay? And historically, that's what we've seen. So in some ways, that seems like, golly, that's a lot. But we kind of know that going in and can sort of include that in our work with students and say, okay, some of those kids will probably be okay. We want to keep an eye on them. We want to make sure they're thriving the way we want them to. And we have a reason to suspect that they will improve over time. But we still need to pay attention. We still need to make sure they're going to be okay.
Since I can't see it very well, except that it's red and green, can you explain to me, what the red signifies and what the green signifies?
So green means these students are scoring at about the 45th percentile or above, based on national norms. 30 to 30,000 students and a norm pool of about 30,000 students and up, right? So very large national norm pool. And compared to that national norm pool, the scores that these students had on these very quick assessments, the math assessment is 7 minutes. 8 minutes, 7 minutes. 8 minutes, thank you. 8 minutes, okay? So on a very quick screen, we start to get information that says, yeah, probably these guys, and we have some really good, and you'll see that in a little bit, we have some really good predictive data that say these are good predictors of outcomes for large-scale assessment. We've got a very quick way to say, oh, okay, these students we're less concerned about, these other students we really want to find out what's going on, get them what they need so they can thrive in the regular classroom.
When do you do another screenshot? Or another snapshot?
Another snapshot happens in January, and another snapshot at the end of the year.
Because it would be, I would actually like to see the growth. Yes.
Change over time. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Just so
absolutely.
you might want to change the word snapshot to a benchmark. You talk to them about benchmark.
It is a benchmark. It's the reason I put snapshot in there is because, unlike some other data that you're about to see, these data change very rapidly.
Right.
And it's not as if we would use them to make summary statements about students. We'd use them just as when I say in the benchmark data meetings, I really would like it if we just had a little indicator that you could sort of put on a kid's hand and red, yellow, green, and you'd know, right? So the numbers are less important than this idea of let's screen and identify kids.
So back to Judy's question, I'm not sure if I completely understood the answer, but what I think I understood is that, say the very first line of red and green, that's academy, fourth grade, or kindergarten, and that's whatever it is, 58%
58% approximately.
Is at the national benchmark or higher. And then whatever that other number
The
would be.
other 100, so 42%.
42% is below the national benchmark
Yes,
in some way.
yes,
Okay.
So when you get
right
over,
now, at that point.
So when you get over there, the red is now higher.
Right.
Great.
You have more kids below the national 50th
I
percentile,
see.
not
So
45th
that's always the
percentile.
one that's below, just happens to be higher because they're more below.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So here's math, that benchmark, snapshot benchmark, and here's literacy. So what you found in 4th grade, we also find for literacy in 2nd grade. 2nd grade is where kids really take off in their reading, and those scores can really jump over the course of the year. Okay? So really how we use these data are in terms of individual students. So imagine that there are names here. I've left out the names. Here are the students that are on IPs or EST. So we have that information in place. Here's how they scored. These are 2nd graders. Here's how they scored last year at the end of the year on that literacy screening tool. Here's how they scored in the fall this year. This is a reading, words read correct per minute. This is a reading, there's a score, there's the accuracy of their reading, there's the change from fall from this number to this number to give you an idea of how much loss happens over the course of the summer. Sometimes there is considerable loss. And then some other, in this case, a spelling inventory, and then here are the math scores. So really how we use those data are to look at individual kids and say, is this kid thriving? If not, what do they need?
Who sees this data?
3 times a year, grade level teachers get together. There's a benchmark data meeting that lasts all day at a given school. Grade teachers, academic support, special educators come in. Lyle and Brian and I are there, and the principal is there, and we have a discussion. We look at data like this, look at graphs of the data, and have a discussion about classes as a whole and individual students. Often, if it hasn't happened already, we identify groups of students that would benefit from specific Tier 2 interventions. So the looking at the data is really about who are the kids, what do they need, how can we get them what they need so they can thrive in Tier 1 instruction.
And when does the parent hear about it?
These data are also produced in a sort of a form that's available to parents for parent conferences. Generally that happens on an individual student level with parents at parent conferences. We make a sort of a student profile form available that uses these data.
And what is Tier 1 and Tier 2? Is Tier 1
Sorry.
the classroom and Tier 2?
Whole class instruction. Tier 2 is intervention for those students who need additional support, may need some skills work, may need some repetition of the lesson content, and also for enrichment for students that need additional support to keep them going and involved and participating.
So Paul, coming back to the parent piece, I went as a parent, parent-teacher conference. I don't remember ever seeing a percentage change over the summer.
Oh yeah, I don't know that that's a really great question. We generally just produce the scores and don't look at the student loss.
So I see like a benchmark for my child. Here's the national. Here's where my child is, and I see a couple benchmarks. Usually, November parent-teacher conference. I think I saw September and October.
Yep, that's such a great suggestion. I will say. And give credit to Bryn Tucker, who is academic support at Green Street and who has done a lot of our data support for a long time. She's the genius behind those data forms that you get. I'll have a conversation with her. We can put the summer loss, excuse me, in there for the fall conferences. It's a great idea.
It would be good to know.
Huge.
I'd probably just feel guilty. But
Wait, have I got any more slides? Is Brian next?
I think.
Brian is next.
Summer learning loss is, is evident, and we've only been formally tracking it in this way by making a column here. I think last year was the first year we did that. You could manually do that by looking at where a student left 3rd grade and where they began 4th, and we would do that but because we were doing it so frequently, it became so important, we just started actually creating the column there. And it was the first time this year that we actually had that on those data forms for teachers.
The big aha that comes out of that is almost invariably those students who are struggling the most see the greatest summer loss. If there were a more eloquent argument for year-round school, I don't know what it is.
Sorry.
I just would feel like I have to say this because it always makes me uncomfortable looking at Ames Web data like this. This is not the intent or the purpose of the Ames Web data. And it really needs to be looked at in the context of students and student learning. So taking it out of the context and presenting it and comparing schools, I feel like is not the purpose of that data. And if you want to use data for that, I would strongly encourage using the SBAC data. It makes me very uncomfortable presenting the Ames Web data in this way because it's very, very misleading and it's very easy to misinterpret the data. If you would like to see how we use it, I would strongly encourage you to attend one of our data meetings and actually see how we put the data to work. But I think pulling it out of context and presenting it this way makes me pretty uncomfortable.
Could you say why the CBAC is a better measure? Because that also, you know, it tracks the kids according to the scores according to schools. So what's the difference in the test?
This is a screening and a predictor.
Yep.
So it's a 1-minute snapshot of that student, which there's variability within the schools.
Yep.
So when we look at, and I'll show you correlations between the screener and the actual assessment, and they vary by school. So I was just looking at them, I think, I don't remember them, but the range was from like 0.7 to 0.8 in the correlation, looking at how strongly the Ames Web predicts how well kids would do on the SBAC. Also, there's cohort effect. So we know with the our current fourth grade, there's some fourth grades that would look terrible on this, but in reality, you have to see where what they look like when they came to us in kindergarten. So it's very, very misleading, and I don't think it really does us much justice to talk about schools.
Seeing that cohort over the years would be, that's one of the things I was thinking about when we saw the fourth grade math and the way that changes.
I would encourage you to look at SBAC data from third to fourth to fifth to sixth.
Yeah, as we get it.
Yeah.
But again, in terms, I know it's difficult because cohorts change.
Yeah.
But you might be able to identify groups of individuals that are there pre-K or K through 6 and see what the trend is. I think the basic thing I'm looking for is something that indicates that using this and the curricula that we choose and all of the things that we're doing and the things we focus and emphasize and put time into is actually resulting in the outcomes for the students that we want, so that when they get to middle school they're ready, and when after middle school they're ready for high school, and then for whatever comes after. And obviously this doesn't show that, but it helps us understand what's going on or how you're trying to get there.
Let me show you how we put the data to work, because that's really why we use it. So the Ames Web allows us to measure small things to predict big things, right? So the SBAC, as you might know, takes 3 days to do the English language arts, 3 sessions. We do this, and a teacher can assess her whole class in under 2 hours. It quickly identifies students who are or are not at risk for experiencing failure in reading and math. We look at that 3 times a year, our benchmark periods. It allows us to monitor student growth over the course of the year and gives us feedback on the effectiveness of our intervention. So we're going to look at 2 case studies, both of kids with significant reading disabilities. Now, there's a lot of us that come to education, and many teachers really like school, right? And school was very easy for them, and it was very easy for their children. So I want you to understand that learning to read for some kids is a lifelong pursuit. So we have kids in our schools who really struggle with reading. So I just want to put that out there. You might not have to experience that in your life or with your kids, and you should be thankful for that. So we're going to look at some kids who are the kids that we spend a lot of time with. This first student is a 4th grader with a significant reading disability. We had a benchmark meeting in September, and the benchmark data indicated that this kid is reading below the 1st percentile. So if you were to line up 100 4th graders, this kid would be first in line with 99 of his classmates ahead of him. And with a reading ability near the middle of fourth grade. Our intervention goal that we set up at that meeting was to reduce the 2.5+ year gap by a year. And our intervention plan that we set up was 60 minutes a day literacy intervention in a small group. We recently just had a progress monitoring meeting, and their current results indicate that this is not a successful intervention.
Brian, before you go, the intervention goal means you want to put 2 years worth of learning into 1 year.
Yeah. Well, we got to account for the current year. Yes.
Right. This year and an additional year.
Correct.
And who comes up with the goal?
It's the team.
The kid, the parents?
No.
Brian, is the intervention in a small group, is that with a reading teacher?
This would be in addition, this would be, for a student with this would be actually a tier 3 intervention. Sometimes the nature of a tier 3 intervention replaces the tier 1 instruction. It varies. So what we do now is looks a little crazy, but the blue dot is the student. All you have to pay attention to is 2 pieces here. This looks at the RCBM, which is a reading curriculum-based measurement, from middle of first grade to the beginning of 4th grade. The student is the blue dot, and the dark black line is the 50th percentile target. So if you look at the student's trajectory versus the expected trajectory, you can see the gaps getting huge.
Even though there's improvement.
Well, the student is making improvement, but the improvement is actually getting left behind. You can see the gap between the blue dot and the black line gets bigger. So what we do is we do something called a survey level assessment. So this is, again, these box and whiskers graphs. The green is essentially the 25th to the 75th percentile. It's sort of the average range. And you can still kind of see that the 50th percentile target. So you can see this is the black line is the student in 4th grade, 3rd grade, 2nd grade. Now we start to get to an average ability in 2nd grade, and then you can see in 1st grade the student. So the student's sort of performing in the middle of the 1st grade. So then we think about, well, where are we going to monitor this student's progress? Because obviously monitoring this student's progress with a 4th grade passage would be pointless, right? He's reading about 8 words a minute. It's not going to tell you. It's not really sensitive enough to growth. So we do this sort of like Goldilocks rule. What's going to be what's too easy, what's too hard, what's too right? The team decided we're going to progress monitor at the 2nd grade level. All right. So we put our intervention in place. We now progress monitor this 4th grade student using a probe from the 2nd grade. We do that once a week. It takes 1 minute.
So is this 4th grader in the 4th grade classroom all the time?
Well, except for when the student's being pulled out for the intensive reading instruction.
And then he's pulled out on his own, or he's pulled out to go
This particular student's pulled out with one other student. So here's our progress monitoring graph. The names have been blocked out. Students in 4th grade, it's a 2nd grade probe. This is where we started. This is we need to hit that mark to close the gap I described earlier, essentially a two-year gap. This intervention clearly not working. Right? So essentially the red dots are the words read correctly on those 2nd grade probes. The green dots are the errors. I wish they would reverse that, but it is what it is. So here's a student that's in big trouble. So we met 6 weeks ago, we met actually last week, and the team met to review the data. We modified the initial intervention. We're going to switch up some programming. When we talk about interventions, there's 3 things under teacher's control. That's the program, the material we use, that's the size of the group, and that's the duration of the intervention. Those are the only 3 things that we can control. The team met with the parents. The student's going to begin after-school tutoring. And the team agreed that we will review the data in 6 weeks.
The student wasn't in after-school tutoring?
Not this year.
Why?
Well, this is, I wouldn't get like into that level. This is,
Well, the
yeah.
question I guess is, I thought that was one of our first things that we put in as a program, that we always have that as an option.
For a kid with such an extreme reading disability, I don't know that just a general after-school tutoring session would be robust enough to make the sort of gains that we would need to see with a student with a significant reading disability. So that's case study 1. That's how we use the data. Now we'll go slightly more positive. Case study 2, very similar student, significant reading disability. The benchmark data indicated a student reading below the first percentile with a reading ability near the first grade. It's starting to sound a little familiar. Our intervention goal, this kid is a 3rd grader, so we're 2 years behind, and our goal was to reduce that gap by about 1.5 years, including the year. So this kid, instead of being 2 years behind at the end of the year, would be 0.5 years behind. The intervention plan calls for 3 weeks, 3 times a week literacy intervention for 45 minutes, plus 2 times a week literacy intervention for an hour, and 2 times a week with a private tutor who's trained to work with kids with specific learning disabilities such as dyslexia. Progress monitoring indicates a successful intervention. So here's this kid's survey level assessment. Again, the blue dot targets the black line. You can see the gap gets bigger over time. We did a survey level assessment. Even though it was slightly lower, we decided to progress monitor at the 2nd grade level. And this is the results of our interventions. So far, you can see a progress monitoring data point was just added today.
It's interesting to note that the comparison of these 2 students so far has shown us that this student had a much more composite sort of tutoring assessment than the first. The first had an hour extra of delivery. This one had 3 different applications, so that child had 3 different ways to gain information. I mean, I think that's also one of the things you have to, you have to put into this, because as a teacher and a student, there are different ways of learning. So that was, I think, a primary focus point of just showing that. Right.
And I would also argue that the programming that's being used with this student is different than what we saw in the first 2. And actually, with the addition, with taking away the tutoring, the kid actually has slightly less intervention time during the day, half an hour less, because it's 3 times a week for 45 minutes and 2 times a week for an hour, while the other kid had 5 times a week. So you can see the results look great. And so the team met to review the data, and we decided to keep the intervention program as is. The team agreed to review the data in 6 weeks to see about moving progress monitoring from the 2nd grade to the 3rd grade level, which would be awesome. And the team acknowledged that there's a potential to completely close the gap by the end of the school year.
So Brian, a couple of questions.
Yeah.
The mom and dad, the parents, what level of information do they know of all this?
Which case study are you talking about?
Either one, both?
Fully informed.
So they would be pulled in and they've said, this is where your child is in comparison to national, this is our plan, this is what we're doing?
Is there here are some things you can do at home?
Sometimes it's really hard conversations, like, by this point, if you have a significant learning disability, say if you have dyslexia, there's a huge genetic component. So often the question needs to be asked, if we want to sort of circle up and know exactly what we're dealing with, is, okay, who's the uncle or who's the family member that also struggled to read? In the most recent meeting, it was the dad who said, yeah, I didn't learn to read until I was in middle school. And so we have some of those pretty hard conversations. So they've all seen the graphs, they know their kids are performing at the first percentile, and we know that there's a lot of work to do.
And then the second part of my question is socially.
Yeah.
One of the things I've always been impressed with as a parent, from my experience with my kids, is they would tell me they're pulled out, and I said, well, why are you pulled out? I don't know. They never knew whether they were being pulled out to get good or remedial. They never knew. So socially, I'm wondering if that's still usually true, or if, and the child in the second case study should be glowing and thrilled and feeling that. I mean, is the child aware of how much he or she has grown?
Yeah, well, when it's your job to come to school and learn to read, and first and second grade, and you're not doing your job, you feel pretty terrible about yourself. And so these are some, there are significant emotional consequences of not learning to read. So these kids have experienced that. I think they know they're getting pulled out because they that first case study is pretty much a non-reader. So, I don't know that I can fully answer your question. I think the kids know they're getting pulled out of their classroom to become better at reading, because up to this point they haven't mastered reading. Yes, the second kid is glowing with his most recent progress in learning to read as a third grader.
I know my children have always seen the progress reports and gotten excited about them if they were good or not?
Yeah, sometimes with a kid that's so disabled, we make our own progress monitoring graphs that are more sensitive and not showing them that you're reading material that's 2 or 3 grades behind your current functioning. But we do things that are more directly related to the curriculum and not more general in nature.
The SEL will really impact these numbers as well.
Pardon?
Social emotional learning.
Oh, absolutely.
Will absolutely impact these numbers. I mean, being taken out, like the first, just having that one set of ways to introduce literacy to him instead of having more than one application, you know, could also make him feel that way that he's not learning. So I think what Jill's saying is very important. Yeah, and I know that my kids, luckily, I didn't have that, go through that, but my son right now is in 10th grade tutoring a student in 9th grade. When he was in elementary school, I would have never thought. Do you know what I mean? But that's where he is right now in social studies, and I think that's the reward, and he's feeling that. But he worked very hard. I mean, he did have a little bit of help in elementary at Green Street, and that I think is probably the growth would be so good for all the parents to see. You know, like we were saying before, how you sort of were comparing schools, but really these sort of data analysis and assessments are for individual and to see exactly that growth. So if there's something like that, I think that would be a great thing for us to see.
So this is really how we use the data to inform our instruction. As you can see, I'm going to provide you 2 very different case studies of what's happening right now. And it's teaching kids to read is not like building airplanes. You know, every airplane's the same, right? Follow the same model. Every kid is different and sort of requires a different set of instructions that we sort of make up somewhat as we go along. It's very complicated work for some of our most needy students. And fortunately, it's not like that for everybody.
On the tutoring that the second student had, was that did I see private?
It's a private tutor.
Private. Now, was that something the parents paid for, or was that something that...
the parents were paying for.
Okay.
There aren't a lot of folks who are trained that have the highest level of training needed to work with some of our most disabled kids.
Well, and I know that there are, for financially disadvantaged children, there are other tutoring opportunities that are that we have grants for.
Yes, we do.
Because I know that big work was home with parents for students. So I don't know if that family's trying to take of the first student. If they're able to try to take advantage of that private tutoring.
They're both set up with private tutors outside of the school for this particular case studies.
But we don't pay for that? Because I thought that was part of the failing school thing we had. No?
Well, we never use the word failing school, first of all. That's a bad word, Jill. There's a detention in that word.
But the No Child Left Unharmed had part of it was that you could get, if the school was identified as not making adequate progress, you could get a private tutor and the district would pay for it.
Well, you could get a private tutor, but supplemental educational services was a requirement that is no longer there. I'll put an asterisk next to that. So we were required to send students who qualified for free reduced lunch. We had to make it available to them, tutoring, which we paid for, as long as the tutors were approved or certified by the Agency of Education. And in this area, it was Sylvan Learning Center or Options for Learning.
And Sylvan closed.
I'm sorry?
Is Sylvan
closed, and this year, starting this year, for students who were involved in supplemental educational services last year outside of the school, we had either we had to offer them tutoring in the school, or we then would pay for the supplemental educational services. So, and then next year, supplemental education services are gone.
And Amy, can you remind us of the statistic, if they're not reading by a certain level, by a certain age, they end up with all these secondary problems?
Third grade, we need kids reading at grade level by the end of third grade.
But there's statistics on what happens or more.
I think it's a higher percentage of dropout. It's not that it's too late, but it's a lot harder to teach a 4th and 5th and 6th grader to, you know, it's
a little hard for that child to be in that environment.
absolutely, it's not all that fun.
So it's a good time to plug the budget, because all of the after-school stuff that we do, like we run, for example, an after-school gym class. I think all 3 schools we can run that, and we might put 20 kids in there with an instructor. We pay $30 an hour to our gym teacher to do this after school, and there's 20 kids in it, or 15 kids. If there's 15 kids, there's $2 per student hour to do that. That's very inexpensive, right? 15 kids, paying someone $30 an hour, it's great. But with tutoring, we don't put 15 kids in. We might put 2 kids in, and we're still paying $30 an hour, so it's $15 an hour. So the more tutoring you do, the more expensive it is. And we have to work hard to get tutors, to get teachers to come back after school, stay here after the contractual day is over and tutor. We have to bus kids, so there is a big expense and that budget continues to grow. We're probably going to ask for an increase in that again for FY18. So just keep that in mind.
Brian, let me build on what Andy was saying, budgetary considerations. How about parental involvement considerations? Is there a regimen that the parents can follow to assist their students who falls within these parameters in reading? Do you have recommended reading lists? Do you have recommended procedures whereby they can set their little child down next to them on a couch and they can read together for an hour a night, 2 hours a night, whatever it is?
Two recommendations that I have for parents are continue, lap time for as long as the child will sit in your lap, which some family, or sit next to you, and continue reading aloud to your child. That promotes vocabulary, that promotes background knowledge, general knowledge, exposure to more complex sentence structure. And then for the kid to practice something that he or she has learned to do at school that he or she is extremely successful with. So typically reading a book or a passage that the student has read to mastery. What we don't want students to do is go home and try and figure out reading on their own, which usually resorts to guessing, which is about the worst habit you could have as a reader. So the recommendations I make with parents is not to the kids like this are working really, really hard most of the day. And so to go home and have to do more learning, that can be stressful, but being read to can be very enjoyable, and reading something with a sufficient amount of fluency so you feel like a successful reader every day, pretty critical. So those are the 2 recommendations I typically make. Sometimes going through, index cards with some of our, trick words like, words like said and was and the, and those sort of very high frequency words.
I've got another thought, but I'll sort of sit on that.
Yeah, sometimes putting the teacher or the parent in the role as being the teacher, some family dynamics might allow that to happen.
Well, one of the things I try with my own kids, 4 of them, if they find something they like to read, and it's not necessarily on the school's prescribed reading list, like Batman and Robin, Superman, and superheroes, is there any encouragement for them to pick up, I forget what they call it today, graphic novels?
Sure.
It's called comic books.
There's significant research that suggests kids who are reading about something they're interested in read much better, and they're reading about have much better comprehension than they're reading about something you might not know as much.
Sure.
High interest.
As long as nothing is discouraged, I'm happy to hear that.
Well, the only discouragement would be if it's something that's so complex that the kid's going to guess every other word. And that's a habit we work on breaking. So I've taken up too much time.
So to this point, we've talked about forms of assessment that formative and diagnostic screening assessments that we feel like are critical to have in place in order to produce results that you'll see for the summative, large-scale summative assessment, science, math, and literacy, particularly the math and literacy results. But I'll show you the science results first. Here are grade 4 science results from the spring 2016 administration. Science is assessed at 4th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. So we're just looking at the 4th grade results. NECAP is still the program being used. That's not going to be used going forward. here are the schools. This is what was asked for: Academy, Oak Grove, Green Street, Dummerston, Guilford, Putney, Vernon, the whole district, and the state. And what you're seeing are percentage of students who were proficient or above.
Is there a reason why we say science is so important? We worry about STEM at the high school level, and we talk about all the jobs that are out there and careers that are so important with science, and yet we test science 4th, 8th, and 11th, and that's it.
We
Why?
test science at 4th, 8th, and 11th grade because that was the requirements of No Child Left Behind, and that's the requirements of Every Student Succeeds Act.
So I'm just going to
It's
crazy here.
expensive
I'm going to go crazy here and say that if we as a district, the whole supervisory union, think that science is important to the nation, to our kids achieving, what we put an emphasis on measuring and looking at is where we end up. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. And I think we do ourselves a disservice here. And maybe it doesn't have to be a very expensive test. Maybe it's some other type of way of seeing that. I don't know, maybe they're capstones that are done in 4th grade instead, and that we start to see kids working with some sort of basic rudimentary of research or something. I don't know what it is, but I just think we don't do much with measuring science, and the same thing with writing. That's my little speech.
I agree that we don't do much with large-scale assessment of science. Certainly the assessment, as in any classroom, in classrooms, science is assessed ongoing. But yeah, we could certainly, if that was a priority, we could certainly look at it.
It would have to be a whole board priority for the whole unit.
The really good large-scale science assessments are going to involve some sort of practicum, and that's particularly expensive to assess. Bringing together materials, having, say, an inquiry, having students work with materials, and then, what do you do with the materials after? That's part of why it's expensive and part of why they only went to those grades. So there's science.
I want to point out that we're almost an hour into this.
Okay, sorry, I'll be quick. Here is math. Again, Academy, Oak and Green, Dummerston, Guilford, Putney, Vernon, the district, WSESU, and the state. Those are the math scores. Questions?
This again is 4th grade?
This is all, and thank you for asking that question. The state, rightly so, is starting to say, combining the scores across grades is statistically a little shady, a little questionable. And the results that they produce now no longer have any summing of all of the test scores for the whole school. They look at it grade by grade. I think that's actually a positive way to go, but what was requested was a whole school summary, so we literally multiplied percentage proficient by the number of students testing for each of the grades to come out with a number that was proficient, and then divided that by the whole testing population in order to recalculate these percentages. The state does not give us these percentages.
This is combined grades 3, 4, 5, and 6 at each site.
Okay.
Could I ask a question about the Green Street scores? Because I've noticed, in looking at the Ames Web and CBAC scores, that Green Street often, is struggling, to catch up with the others. And I just wondered, do you have some understanding of what that school culture is like that accounts for, Green Street, just not having the same kinds of scores?
Our hypothesis is a couple of things. Green Street's free and reduced lunch numbers rose very rapidly from being very low, the lowest in the town, to now being nearly the highest over a short amount of time. Yeah. And it takes teachers a while to get used to the fact that they need to teach it a different way to this population. We've also had a change in leadership in the last 10 years, at least 3 principals, and that makes a huge difference.
I wondered just about, that particular, population, and just, we know about the opioid, epidemic, and whether there's just more. I mean, I know it's everywhere, but I just wonder whether that particular corner of Brattleboro experiences more drug-involved families, in addition to the poverty, and whether that affects how children come to school and can learn.
Yeah, and Mark will be able to answer that.
Oh, just the opiate crisis potentially affecting Green Street and Lincoln Academy.
I can't speak to the other schools, but it certainly is. As I reported in my monthly report, we had 17 DCF calls just within the past 30 days.
And in comparison, the figure from Academy, I think, was 20. And also the same if you compare this to what we got tonight. Oak Grove had 7 kids in foster care, and Academy had 6. I think whatever it was higher, and the number of kids, Judy, is much lower. Of course, it's 350 or so, 356, and I think you were at 225. So the percentage is high of a lot of those things. That anecdotally, I know I hear parents tell me that they had 2 kids go to the school, the same Green Street school, and say one is a senior and one's a 6th grader or 7th grader. And they felt like they had children in 2 completely different schools in that change, in that particular time. And I think other parents would likely say the same thing.
My son went to school there, and I'd say, yeah, they're totally different schools.
Different schools meaning that
leadership as well as the community. It's much more, I'd say, inner city now. I wouldn't say that. I used to teach in New York City, and I see a lot of the similar, not just poverty, but issues, social, as well as the coming in at a lower, reading level or something like that. They're starting at a different place. And when my son was there, it was not like that. I mean, they won the spelling bee. They still won the spelling bee. And they're going to do that. They're still doing that. But I'm just trying to say, it was a different community. It was a different leadership, and it's changed twice. This is the 3rd time, and so that really sent a message. And leadership now is really putting things together, I think, in a much more, from our own community members who have shared this with us, Agnes Mjenovic and others, a much more concrete sort of interconnection just between the parents and trying to get outreach in the community. And I think that's going to be a big part of, building the foundation that you're working on.
So I'll just say, seeing our scores over time on summative assessments like the SBAC, it takes time to see that progress. We have instituted, this is starting my 3rd year at Green Street, we have instituted 2 new reading programs, math program, and adopted an MTSS structured system for instruction. So in our individual data meetings that we have with Brian and Paul, we do see, we are seeing a lot of success. So I predict over the next 2 to 3 years, the summative scores will show that as well.
So the changes are evident in the community, and we went through that here, and it took us about 5 years to go from among the lowest in the state to being above the state average. And Mark is in year 3, and you go through a period where the school needs to change to meet the needs of its changing population, and that's what Mark is doing, and you'll see significant gains, absolutely, next few years.
So here are the literacy data. Again, Academy, Oak Grove, Green Street, Dummerston, Guilford, Putney, Vernon, the whole SU, and the state. Okay? Questions on that? Just trying to keep things moving.
Doing well.
Turn it over to Shelley.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was asked to just do I'm going to close this out here with just a brief checking in on special education in Brattleboro Town Elementary, and also talk a little bit about step services. So this slide just represents on December 1st of every year we report to the state what's called a child count. This is district-wide data starting back in 2010. So this data point here for 2016, those are active students as of 2 days ago, actually, when I did this slide, that's actually gone up 1 student in 1 day.
You said district-wide, but you mean SU-wide? Yeah? Not
Yes, I'm sorry, SU-wide, thank you. Yep, this is WSESU as a whole, this particular slide. And we're actually, Reese and I were at the finance meeting earlier, we're actually anticipating, you know, a little bit of a jump SU-wide in the child count for special education. We have, you know, between 30 and 40 students. Of those students, about 28 are at the elementary level, and half of those are in Brattleboro town. This is just a breakdown of, this is some longitudinal data about district-wide, Brattleboro town, elementary, numbers of special education students. And again, on the last data point here for 2016, this is not an official child count, this is just what we have in our database as of 2 days ago. And you can, blue is Academy, orange is Green Street, and that, whatever color that is, gray, is Oak Grove School.
So this is not that's by pure number of students, so it's not percentage.
That is pure number of students.
It'd be interesting to know a percentage if we're about the same. Anybody want to try the math really fast?
You know, I've compiled rate data before. The special education rate in Brattleboro town actually, and again, this is off the top of my head, actually tends to be lower than the outlying town elementary schools, at least for the last 2 or 3 years, which I think is fabulous considering the challenges, you know, that we just talked about that we're facing. STEP services in Brattleboro elementary schools, just a very brief, you know, check-in right now. All 3 elementary schools, Academy, Oak Grove, and Green Street, all have what I consider to be STEP services functioning at full capacity. That consists of an intensive case manager and a behavior interventionist, along with paraeducators who receive a higher level of training and in order to have a higher level of expertise with students with challenging behavior in the classroom. So this is just a quick what STEP is. It's really an inclusion support, and it's available to all students within a building. It's really a model, you know, Andy Pachuli, Greg Stoller, and I presented at the BEST conference this summer, and I have people, I'm on my 2nd school district contacting me, you know, wanting information about how do we replicate this model, you know, in our district as well. STEP is a blueprint. All the schools in Brattleboro town are working on an MTSS, a multi-tiered systems of support, service delivery model for academics, and we are also, STEP provides the blueprint to schools for how to deliver the Tier 3 interventions for our most challenging students, the students who are really most challenged with behavioral issues in the general ed setting. And so what STEP does, this is actually, it was Jim Curry who coined this this term. I don't know if you know that, but it really is the blueprint for what we do at Tier 3. It really helps school teams figure out how to problem solve.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You were speaking earlier about that one case study that was, the student was just doing very poorly in 4th grade. Was STEP also included in that process of assessment and the prognosis to help him? Either one, Jeffrey can answer.
I don't know if that particular student receives STEP services.
Okay, that's just my question.
I would prefer the administrator. Yeah.
Okay, great. I was just wondering if the application was made.
And STEP services are not the same kids every single day, right?
No,
They
STEP
can go in and out as they need.
Yeah, STEP services are very individualized and they're very fluid. So year to year, you know, a student may need a very high level of STEP intervention one year, and then the next year they might not need any. We actually, at Academy School now, you know, STEP services have been in existence long enough that there are students who, well, when I first started the program back 2009, those students are in 7th grade now, and some of those kiddos we worked on with in kindergarten, students who needed a one-to-one paraeducator to be with them the whole day, all day, every day, needed an extensive academic differentiation. 2 of those 3 students are actually not even special ed eligible anymore, and they are just in BAMs. So we have a lot of kind of those longitudinal case studies now at this point. This is my last slide. Very quickly at a glance, of the students right now in Brattleboro town, elementary schools, who are special education students, 44% of them are receiving STEP services. And what I mean by, I guess I would say they are receiving all of the STEP services, which includes intensive case management, paraeducator support, behavior plan management and coordination, and the classroom teacher coaching and support. So we have, you know, almost half of the kids on IEPs in Brattown are accessing and using and benefiting from those services. An additional 38 students are receiving what we call Tier 2 behavioral support from STEP, and that could be, those are students who don't necessarily have a full-on behavior plan, but they might do check-in and check-out, or be on a plan for a certain period of time and then fade off as their behavior and functioning improves. And then this last bit of data is a little anecdotal, but felt important to include it anyway. I asked the 3 STEP teams to you know, to do sort of a gathering of information of the students you're working with now and students that you have worked with in the past. So at Academy School, that would be, you know, over 7 years now at this point. You know, give me a number of students who have benefited from STEP service to the point where, you know, we're talking about kids who may have at one point been at risk for an out-of-district placement because of their behavior, but who now that need has been reduced or altogether eliminated, and that number is 29 students. So if you think about cost-benefit analysis, you know, out-of-district placements range anywhere from 30,000 to 100,000. I mean, there's quite a range there. I feel very strongly that we are doing our job and helping kiddos who are struggling with those behavioral issues to stay in their home school.
Shelley, we spent a bit of time last night in the Act 46 meeting. We're talking about equity and what programs, the questions come up, you know, what's the input? David, you say this quite often. What are the inputs that we've used in Brattleboro Town Schools, and what's the outcome? To me, this is a no-brainer. This is an input with some really clear outcomes that are not only educational, but life-changing, I think, to kids and the kids around them that are affected. Is this going on in all the other schools? To what extent can you?
Brattleboro Town elementary schools have what I consider fully functioning STEP services, which means they have all the components in place, you know, an intensive case manager, a behavior interventionist, preferably a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst, and paraeducators to carry out the work. In the outlying schools, we are working on getting higher levels of training for the paraeducators that work with kids with behavior issues. At the middle school and high school, you know, Marisa's worked hard to lay the groundwork at that level as well to build these services in. And so it's definitely a work in progress. We're working on it.
And on top of that, I think you said it earlier, but the percentage of students, new students that have just come into the district this year, right?
Right. We have 15, was it, for Brattleboro Town, of the
that's
referrals?
Right, evaluations,
Yeah.
but I think, what did we say? There's 44 new referrals across the board, so you know.
We have to remember that some of those children are probably going to be eligible for STEP services.
Right.
So, you know, our goal is that if we can help them early on, that, you know, they'll have success. Right. Like many of our other students have.
Right.
Okay. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is really informative. Is there, at this point, actually, the board needs to hear from Frank for a budget update that we didn't get quite yet from you. But were there any questions on this part before we thank these folks? I think they deserve a round of applause, really. Okay, so Todd wants to just have homework, but let's have some highlights, right?
Highlights? Okay, here we go. So this is the year-to-date budget for all of our 3 schools in the Brattleboro Town School District, and it is through October 30th, so that would be 4 months year-to-date. When you go to the very back of the report, page 13, get the total. So as far as the format, the first column of data there, $15,987,000, that's what was the approved budget. The range to date is just the month of October, 1.3 million. More meaningful number year to date is 4,165,000. So that's, as I say, 4 months through end of October. And then when you go all the way to the right, the percentage, this is about what you would expect. 4 months through, about a quarter of the year. So there's the highlight. A quick overview, and then we'll be getting into a lot more of the financial reports as we get into budget. But so this is your general operating fund. This is expenditures. The report provides an overview of the district-wide programs on the first couple of pages. I made a note on on page 5. Gives you the total of the district-wide programs. So, $16 million budget, and nearly half of it is in district-wide. You see that, $7.6 million. I put a little box there for you to draw your attention to that. $7.6 million is our budget, and we spent $1.8. And just as a reminder, as we do budget development, district-wide are those programs that are shared among the 3 schools. So foreign language, the phys ed, music, art, guidance, nurses, that's what's all in page 1 through 5.
And so year-to-date is the 1.8 you're referring to?
The year-to-date, yes, is the 1.8 million. Again, about a third of the budget, and that would be typical of a third of the way through the year. And at this point, I have not heard of any significant variations from the plan. We had a little turnover, but generally it's come out pretty close to the plan. So then on page 5, we start looking at the schools individually. So page 5 is Green Street. You can see like the first line, teacher salary, Green Street. So when you follow that column of data down, Green Street, first column, $1.8 million budget. Year to date, when you go over a couple of columns, is $495,000. And we have our percent at the very far end. Now this does include encumbrances for salaries. So that's why that's not a third, because it's encumbering projected salary for the full year. And then see, our principals aren't here, so if you had questions, I would defer to your principals, but I am sure I can answer them. In total, when you look through all the 03s in this account scheme, when you're looking at the account numbers, there's a 2-digit code there, 03. That's Green Street, and that continues on through page 7. So, in total, Green Street is on page 7. I've got a little box there for you. $2.7 million budget, and I mentioned obviously most of that is in instruction. The first number I mentioned was 1.8 million. Obviously that's where you'd expect most of your resources going. We have Oak Grove starts on page 7. And you know, the comparable number, $1 million on page 8 is in the direct instruction group. You know, the 1100 series, that's all in direct instruction. And then similarly, they have the student support services, behavior, professional development, going on to page 9, library, administrative, custodial. All the schools are laid out the same format. So Oak Grove total is on page 10, 1.7 million. We know that's our smaller school.
How does that compare to the budget of another school that size in our district or in our supervisory unit?
It's smaller, but you would want to, like Guilford is about 2.3 million, but you need to take the district-wide shared services, bring them in, you know, to
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, that's right.
Just curious.
Yeah. Our cost per student is very similar. As a system, Brattleboro Town's cost per student is similar to the small Guilford school, but again, it's not an apples to apples because they get a small school subsidy, you don't. You know, so there's a lot of things that make it sort of difficult. But you can take total budget divided by total kids and make that comparison, and I think you'd find the Guilford school.
Well, that's the number we always review, isn't it? That they're 15,000 whatever? No.
Yeah, no, that's this state ed number that it sets the tax rate, and that's why it's referred to, because it sets the tax rate. The gross spending divided by kids is not used by any state statistic. It's generally not published.
Because it doesn't include the phantom students either, right?
Right.
Frank, are there any things like insurance or bond payments or anything that are already paid off for the whole year's worth that might make this look even better, or are there things coming that are going to bring it closer to 33% when the year is done?
Well, so the big payment, it has been paid off. You know, the big 221,000. Yeah. So there is, under the district-wide section of this budget, we put it in as a transfer to the capital plan, 600,000. Yeah. And I haven't made that transaction, and so let's see, just so you could follow along if you wanted to. That's 4. That's going to be on page 4. Yep. And so you see on page 4, right in the middle, under the 5350 series. So if you're looking down the page, it's right here, 2/3 of the 5350. You see the $646,000 budget, and I haven't made any transactions against that. One thing that we will be doing is the pellet boiler project here has been fully paid for, but it's sitting over in the capital fund as essentially an IOU, in that originally, you know, when you initiated this years ago, you were intending on borrowing money, but we don't need to borrow money. We have this money, the 646. So I will essentially have the general fund pay the capital fund 240,000, and you will see that charge coming up fairly soon. Fortunately, we also received a significant amount of grant money on that as well.
I see after school, back up on page 4, before, yep. That would be district-wide. So is all of the after-school program stuff in one lump sum, or is it by school too?
Yeah, we wanted
both spots.
We wanted to get that associated with each school. So I will. There's a few of these sort of legacy activities that now I'm getting much more familiar with Brattleboro Town budgets, and I'm working very closely with the principals. We'll continue to sort of refine the information so all of us will know who has access and who is accountable for the spending. In the after schools, it's $100,000 in after school programming. This is a small piece that was not consolidated into each school. So for any school, if you look at the 0140 group, so like on page 7 is the Green Street. So in the account number
AS tutors.
Yeah,
After school.
that's it. There you go. So the 0140 group, you see everything has an after-school program. It has a group total. For Green Street, it's a $35,000 budget. We spent $1,400. Every school has an 0140 program. David, this is something I remember you raising a while ago. You know, can we get to program information? And we absolutely can, but we have to follow the the state's program code. We don't want to make up our own stuff. So we can get program information, but it's within a structure that that we're told we need to follow. So we were on Academy, just as a final wrap up. Mentioned that Academy started on page 10, and similarly, obviously most of the money is in the instruction. That's on page 11. Budget of $2.8 million. We've spent year to date $641,000. But when we continue on through, that's the instruction. You can see the library, the admin. On page 11 is also for every school. We've got program improvement and the 1% and teacher leader money. That's part of the staff support services, so that's why it's in that section of this budget. $2,200 is a staff support service. And then on page 13 is your total Academy, $3.8 million budget, and year-to-date $978. Again, typical proportion at this time of the year.
Questions for Frank on the budget?
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Very comprehensive, Frank.
Before we adjourn, David mentioned while we were listening, and I think it's something we should all keep in the back of our heads, what we want to talk about with the town reps, which is a ways off in March. But that sort of presentation that we just had, David was saying might be interesting. So keep those things in your head as we go forward, thinking about what type of information we want to talk to the town reps about when it is our chance in March. One of the things I was thinking about, David, if we do that, what's kind of nice is we've been telling them how terrible, we've given them bad type of things. The poverty's going up, that our challenges keep going up. This is a really positive, this is what we're doing about some of those statistics. So I kind
and this is all, well, it's funny because I was thinking about it in the context of that same context of this is why we have to have all these people, because this is what it takes to get a kid caught up. Right. And it's worth the investment and all of that.
Right, and here's the results.
Right. That's the same story over and over again. We can do that, but combine it with the evidence, just how much is being done to meet the needs of these kids.
And it was really, I don't know if we had adequately expressed our thanks, or at least for myself, to the work that they did in doing that. And try to send a quick email or something tomorrow. But it was, I thought, very realistic when you could see an exact case study. I like that. I don't know if anybody else had any feedback you want me to send along tomorrow. Any thoughts?
I would just, I'm sorry.
They didn't have any thoughts.
Well, should wait a little bit for other thoughts to come out. I guess I would just say, thinking about our school information nights, we've done similar presentations with showing really great outcomes.
Yeah.
And, parent surveys, student climate surveys, and that sort of thing. We'll continue to do that. I think the case studies kind of hit home a little bit more.
This was just very vivid to me.
It's more detailed than
Yeah, and it was something that was very tangible and very comprehensible at a very basic level. Sometimes I think
really
the other stuff is
in terms of sophistication.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's not been made before.
Yeah. So thank you again to them. All right, then.
Somebody gets
motion to adjourn. And all in favor. We're done.